Hi everybody, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name's Brittany and on here we talk all things planty and I'll be introducing some lifestyle content in soon. So today I'm going to be talking about fertilizer, so what it is, how to use it, when to use it and what kinds there are. So if that sounds like something you want to learn about, just keep watching. Alright, so first up, what is fertilizer? What is it to plants and why do we need it? Fertilizer is basically like multivitamins to your plants. So you think of humans and how we need iron and magnesium and vitamin D and all these vitamins in order to make us happy and healthy. Your plants need exactly the same thing. Your soil, your potting mix and things don't automatically include nutrients. So we use fertilizer added into the soil in order to help give our plants everything that they need to thrive. So what makes up a fertilizer? Basically, there's quite a lot of ingredients in it, as there are quite a lot of nutrients that your plants need, but primarily it is a mix of nitrogen, potassium and phosphorus. Yes, I had to look down at my notes. I'm no science professional by any stretch of the imagination, but nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium basically are the three main elements that plants need, and then there are some other supplementary nutrients that they don't need as much of, but most common fertilizers will include them as well, as again they are beneficial for the plants. So fertilizer really helps encourage root growth, leaf growth, flowering, and pretty much just helps keep your plants thriving and happy. So that pretty much covers what fertilizer is. Now I'm going to jump into different kinds of fertilizers. So we know that there's definitely a lot of fertilizers in the store. It's kind of like toothpaste. It's crazy overwhelming, especially as a beginner. I'm not really going to jump too far into the nitty-gritty specialized sort of fertilizers. I'll keep it simple, as again, at the moment at least, my channel and I am focusing on beginner's guide to things. So I want to keep it really straightforward for you and really make it easier. So the first kind of fertilizer that we're most familiar with is the kind that we would add into our plants when watering. So for example, some of the astute of you noticed in my recent houseplant beginner guide, I was fertilizing some plants as well. Totally forgot to mention it, was way too excited working on the skit that I came up with at like 4 a.m. because I don't sleep anymore. But yeah, it's basically your standard sort of pour-in fertilizer. So the one that I was using in that video is the Yates Thrive All-Purpose Fertilizer. Basically, I like the bottle and everything it said sort of summed up what I need. I am still a bit of a beginner personally with buying and using fertilizers. It's primarily because of lockdown. Lockdown is when, you know, I've been into plants for quite some time, but lockdown specifically is when my knowledge and everything, I finally had the time to really research and get to know it. So haven't had the chance to purchase and try too many, but yeah, so this is the Thrive All-Purpose Liquid Plant Food. Liquid plant food and fertilizer, interchangeable terms. Basically what you'd be looking for is an all-purpose, even some of them specifically say indoor plants, sort of general plant food or fertilizer. It will work for a majority of your plants, of course, hence the term all-purpose, but I will jump into a little bit more about some specialized ones that you can use. The other kind of liquid fertilizer that I haven't used yet, but will be using soon as I'm pretty much out of this one, is one that I got in that osmocote little haul. It is the osmocote Pour and Feed Indoor Plants Ready to Use Fertilizer. So this will be something absolutely amazing for beginners. Basically with this you need to dilute it and it can be really tricky figuring out, whereas with this one you don't need to dilute it. Literally you water your plants and then you pour this on top. So it has a dosage guide, so it tells you how wide your pot is and how much of the potting mix to use. So that's really handy to know with that one. All right, so with these liquid plant foods, it's important to know when to use them. Over the winter, you really don't need to use fertilizer all that much. Basically, your plants are in hibernation. They don't need the amount of food and nourishment as they would in summer because they're not growing. Some plants, however, do still grow a little bit in winter. For me, especially my devil's ivy and things like that, they do still grow, but at a much slower rate. So what I like to do is just once in winter, sort of in the middle, so sort of mid to late July, I'll give them a half dose fertilizer water. So when I water them, I just use half the strength as what's in the bottle, of what it says on the bottle to use. And that often just gives them a little bit of a boost for winter and sees them through. The main time that you want to fertilize is in spring and summer. So we are getting to that point now where we'll be needing to start fertilizing again soon. In fact, I've already started fertilizing my plants, as you saw in that video. Basically, again, spring and summer, we all know that's when plants grow, that's when they're thriving, when they're flourishing. You know, you enter spring with a tiny baby plant and you leave summer and head into autumn with beautiful, full, lush plants. So this is when we want to fertilize our plants to really help them grow. How often you want to fertilize them in spring and summer? It does depend. Some plants you can get away with fertilizing them every time you water. I personally feel that's a little bit overkill. So what I like to do is every second water, I will fertilize them, and I do it at a much weaker strength. So what I like to do is I've got this giant jug that I use to water my plants. I will simply put about half a capful to 3/4 of a capful in there and water all my plants. Whether it's bottom watering or top watering, doesn't really make a difference with this. I'll just water them that way. Or again, with the osmocote pour and feed, I would do a half the amount of the dosage. So where it says for 9 to 11 centimeter pots, you use half a cap, I'll use 1/4 of a cap, and I would water the plant and then just pour half a cap of that over. It's basically like a booster. The liquid feeds are like a booster, and you can think of it again, if it's like taking multivitamins, it's like taking your daily supplements. It's going to boost it up, but your primary food source is going to be the slow release fertilizer that I'll talk about in a second. So the next kind of fertilizer that we're familiar with is something like the osmocote plus trace elements, pots, planters and indoors. This is the one that I use primarily because the lady at the nursery told me this would be best. So I haven't done a whole lot of research into specific products. However, this is working really well for me. So I imagine it will work well for most of us too. So these are basically little balls you can see, and you might have seen these before when you buy a plant, especially from a nursery, or you'll see it sort of around the roots inside the plug, which I'll make a whole video on later. But they're basically little balls of different nutrients and elements. Again, they've got that nitrogen, potassium and phosphorus, and they are a slow release fertilizer. So with these, you want to mix them in when you're making your potting mix, and then they slowly release the nutrients over a 6-month period. And after 6 months, you can mix this back into the soil. You don't necessarily need to fully repot. I believe you can sort of sprinkle them around the top and then water it in, and it will sort of over time settle into the pot. So again, the benefit of that really creates that main dose of nutrients for the plants and that sustained longer term growth for your plants as well. You can also go the natural route with these sorts of things. So the more natural alternative to something like the osmocote pearls is your worm castings. Yes, that is a fancy word for worm shit. Tis what it is. I haven't tried worm castings yet, and that's primarily because I don't have the space for a worm farm here, but I am debating ordering some in order to try it out. It is, of course, a more natural, sustainable option, but because of that, you obviously aren't going to know exactly what's going into your soil. So it will depend a lot on what the worms themselves have eaten. If they're in your composting and they're eating up, eggs and banana peels and fruits and vegetables and things, it's pretty safe to assume that there's a pretty solid dose of nutrients in the worm poo, but it's hard to say exactly how much. The other thing that I will do when using these sort of slow release fertilizers is when I do use my liquid fertilizer, I'll again use half strength, but I pretty much use half strength anyway. The reason being is I prefer to use a lower dose more often for my plants. That's just what makes sense to me. Some research that I've done shows that it's better, but again, it's indoor plant care is such your mileage may vary. This is just what works for me. So, you know, the information is solid, but then the rest of it, I'm sharing what works for me. So I'm pretty sure it'll work for you, but I can't, of course, always guarantee that. So the next question I've noticed comes up a lot is, what is Seasol and is it the same as fertilizer? Seasol is a really popular plant product, plant care product, and it is something I myself haven't used, but it is now on my radar and I will pick up a bottle as soon as I can. Now, Seasol technically is not fertilizer. What it is so Seasol is a mix of different seaweeds and it is more of a soil conditioner rather than a fertilizer. It is a treatment which helps promote healthy roots. It stimulates flowering in your plants and it can help plants with stresses such as heat, cold, frostbite, and when your plants are under attack from pests. So it is a really advantageous thing to have in your collection on top of fertilizer, not instead of. The way that I think I will be using this going forward is, again, maybe once a month as a bit of a treatment for my soil to help promote those healthy roots, and also as a sort of antidote to when I am treating a plant for pests. So when you treated a plant for pests, you'll often do things like a hydrogen peroxide bath, or you'll, spray it in some sort of pest chemical killer. Either way, again, it's that bacterial sort of system inside your soil that the plants rely on and they get their nutrients and everything from. So treating them for pests and things will, of course, kill the good bacteria, the same way that antibiotics kill our good gut bacteria as well as our bad. So after, in theory, what I want to try and what I think would work really well is after I've treated a plant for bugs, about 2 weeks after, or I've done a hydrogen peroxide bath, about 2 weeks after, I would give them a sea salt water, again, to recondition that soil and really help add that extra boost. Sea salt can also be used year round, again, because it's not that nutrient food for your plant and it's much more about the soil. It can be used year round, so you can, once a month or so in winter, just pop a little bit of that in with your watering mix as well, and it will just help maintain that soil health for your plants. So lastly, I want to talk a little bit about specialist fertilizers. Now, like I said, I don't currently own any specialist fertilizers. I find for most of your indoor plants, the all-purpose mixes will work really well. So to give you an idea of the kind of plants that I have, obviously you can see them, but I've got quite a few peperomias. I've got different ivies. I've got, more tropical plants. I've got some calatheas. I've got, a wide variety of common to semi-common houseplants, and all of them are pretty happy with the indoor mix. However, the time that you want to use something different is when you have Hoyas or orchids. So Hoyas, unlike most plants, they actually don't necessarily take all their nutrients from the soil. They actually take a lot of nutrients from their leaves, which is very different to most plants. Most plants use their leaves and their foliage to photosynthesize, which Hoyas do as well, of course. But generally, they're not really getting too much of their nutrients from there. Most of the dirty work is done in the roots. With a Hoya, though, it's the other way around. So they still photosynthesize with their leaves, but they do collect their nutrients from their leaves as well. So a lot of people with the Hoyas use a orchid spray that you will then spray onto the foliage of your Hoya, and it will feed it that way. I haven't got my hands on any yet. Again, Melbourne lockdown. I have put in like 4 click and collect orders this week alone between my business and my plants and springtime and needing supplies, and I just constantly friggin' forget certain things. So eventually I will remember to get some orchid spray for my Hoyas. I also only have one Hoya at the moment, but my mum's actually giving me another Hoya this week, and when I finish my last round of chemo in about a month's time, I'm going to buy myself a Hoya Kerrii. So my Hoya collection is growing a little bit. I'm definitely going to need that orchid mix fertilizer. The other thing I wanted to point out, again, I've already mentioned that I do fertilize my plants at half strength. That again is a total choice thing. You might want to use full strength. Perfectly fine. Give it a go, have a play around with it, see how your plants respond. I might even give it a go too and see. They might respond even better with a full dose. However, there are certain plants that I would recommend still using the indoor plant mix for, but also definitely 100% using it at a reduced amount. So that would be anything that's a little bit fussier. So your Calathea, your Stromanthe, and your Maranta or prayer plant, I generally will 100% use a half strength because they're a bit more, just a bit more fussy, a bit more fragile, and you really want to look after them, as well as begonias. Also, I've got a question of the day for you, and that is, what is the latest plant purchase you have made? I'd love to know. Let me know in the comments below, down there. Also, of course, please like the video. That really helps my little baby channel grow, and subscribe so that you can keep watching more informative and hopefully entertaining plant videos from me. Like I said at the beginning, I am going to branch into a little bit of lifestyle as well. So I'm thinking of my surprise Sundays being a bit more still plant related, but a little bit lifestyle-y, talking about a few different things such as surviving lockdown and you know, it's just so you can hang out with me and learn a little bit about me. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, please let me know. Otherwise, I hope you have a wonderful day. I really hope this helped. Thank you so much for watching. Bye.